Mr. Whitford was a man people respected from a distance. His name alone could silence a room, and his presence carried weight like a king among commoners. He owned businesses across cities, wore suits stitched by the most expensive tailors, and lived in a mansion so large that a person could walk for minutes without reaching the end of a hallway. People who worked for him talked about two things: his wealth and his strictness. He never smiled without a reason, never spoke more than necessary, and never tolerated failure. Everything in his life was organized, polished, clean, perfect. Yet perfection is often lonely. Behind the marble walls and golden chandeliers, there was no laughter, no music, no warmth. His dining table could seat 20 people, but he always ate alone. The garden outside bloomed with roses, but no one picked them. His voice echoed inside corridors like footsteps in a museum, impressive but empty. Visitors felt the coldness the moment they stepped into his home, not because the house lacked comfort, but because it lacked people who truly mattered. Years ago, he was different. He knew joy, he knew companionship, and he knew what it felt like to come home to someone waiting for him. But life can be cruel even to the richest man. After losing the only family he ever loved, he poured himself into business. Money became his armor, work became his escape, and silence became his companion. Over time, he built a stone wall around his heart, high, thick, unbreakable. His mansion reflected his soul. The floors shone like mirrors, yet were cold to the touch. Curtains were heavy velvet, but they never swayed because windows were rarely opened. Even the grand piano sitting in the music hall looked like a decoration rather than an instrument meant to breathe sound. Dust never touched it, servants cleaned it regularly, but no one dared press a key. The $1 million piano waited like a locked memory, beautiful but untouched. Every morning began the same way. Whitford woke up before sunrise, sipped black coffee, and read the newspaper while silence filled the air around him. Then he walked through the long hallways, reminding himself that work kept the mind busy, and a busy mind could not grieve. Chauffeurs drove him to his offices, assistants followed him with files, employees stood straight when he passed, afraid to look disrespectful. They admired and feared him in equal measure. But admiration is different from affection. Fear is different from love. Mr. Whitford had power, yes, but he had no one to share his world with. His fortune provided comfort, but comfort without emotion feels like a golden cage, shining on the outside, empty within. At night, when the mansion lights dimmed and footsteps faded away, Whitford sometimes stood near the piano. He never touched it, only stayed still and stared at it for long minutes. The keys seemed to call him softly, like memories whispering from years ago. But he would turn around and walk away because he believed some doors were meant to stay closed. He lived like this for years, strict, lonely, unshaken. People envied his money but never saw the emptiness behind it. Wealth can buy everything except a heartbeat beside yours. It can fill rooms with furniture but not with love. Mr. Whitford knew this too well, but he never showed it. His face remained calm, sharp, unreadable, like a storm hidden behind glass. Then came the decision to hire a new housekeeper, not because he needed one, but because something inside him quietly wished for change. He would never admit it, but having someone walk through the silent halls made the mansion feel slightly less deserted. He wanted order, discipline, cleanliness, nothing more. But life has a strange way of giving us what we need instead of what we ask for. When Maria arrived, Whitford assumed she would be like the others, quiet, obedient, invisible. He expected routine to continue, silence to remain, and days to mirror one another. He did not know that her presence would touch the piano he avoided, stir memories he buried, and awaken emotions he believed were dead. He did not know that inside a simple housekeeper lived a talent capable of breaking walls thicker than stone. For now, he lived unaware, a millionaire with everything the world could offer, yet missing the one thing that gives life meaning. A connection, a story waiting to begin. And the silent piano sat like a secret waiting to be heard. Maria arrived early on a Monday morning, the kind of morning where the sky looked pale and shy, as if unsure whether to brighten or hide behind clouds. She stood at the enormous gate with a small bag in her hand and nervous hope in her eyes. She was dressed plainly, a simple blouse, a long skirt, and shoes that had walked many years. Her posture was humble, her voice soft, but behind her tiredness lived dignity, like a candle that refused to go out no matter how strong the wind blew. When the gate opened, she stepped inside the mansion grounds slowly, almost afraid her footsteps might disturb the silence. The path to the main door was long and lined with trimmed hedges, flowers neat like soldiers in a row. Maria had never walked such a path in her life. Every step felt like entering another world, a world where everything was big, bright, expensive. The housekeeper before her guided her inside and explained her duties. Clean the hall, dust the furniture, maintain the kitchen, polish the stair rails, keep the piano room untouched. Maria listened carefully, nodding quietly. She didn't speak much, not because she was rude, but because she had learned that silence protects you in places where you are small. She met Mr. Whitford for the first time that afternoon. He walked down the staircase with slow, firm steps, wearing a suit that looked like it cost more than her entire life savings. His eyes were sharp, his face unreadable, his presence heavy. Maria lowered her gaze respectfully. She felt his silence wash over her, not warm, not welcoming, just controlled and distant. "You may start work tomorrow," he said simply. His words were brief, clipped like a knife cutting through air. No greeting, no soft tone, only instruction. Maria nodded again. "Yes, sir, thank you." She expected no kindness, no comfort. She came to work not to be seen. Over the next days, she moved through the mansion like a shadow, quick, silent, efficient. She dusted shelves, washed dishes, swept corners most people never noticed. She polished mirrors so well that rich light poured across them like water. She ironed clothes until every wrinkle surrendered. She learned the rhythm of the mansion. The staff whispered, clocks ticked softly, and Mr. Whitford walked with authority, never slowing, never bending. But the grand piano stood out to her from the first moment she saw it. She would pass the music room every morning, broom in hand, and look at it quietly, just for a second. The piano was massive, shining like a black diamond in sunlight. Its white keys looked like teeth of a sleeping creature waiting to wake and sing. She felt something inside her stir each time she saw it. A memory, a longing. A world she once knew, she never touched it. She only stared when no one was watching, because Maria had a secret. Years ago, before her life changed, she had played music like breathing. A piano had been her closest friend, her escape, her dream. But poverty arrived like a storm, wiping away everything: her lessons, her time, her future. She became a housekeeper to feed her younger siblings, then to survive alone after everyone she loved was taken away by illness and bad luck. She locked music inside her heart like a chest that no longer had a key. Still, the piano called her silently each day. One evening, Mr. Whitford entered the music hall unexpectedly while Maria was dusting. She froze like a deer hearing footsteps in the forest. Her hand hovered an inch above the piano surface. She did not look up. "You clean this room often," he said. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "Do you play?" His voice was calm, too calm. A question with weight inside it. Her heartbeat jumped. For a moment she wanted to lie, say no, walk away, continue her simple life unseen. But her fingers remembered the feel of keys, her ears remembered melodies, and her heart remembered dreams too beautiful to erase. "I used to," she answered softly. Mr. Whitford's eyebrows lifted slightly, interest flickering like a flame before settling. "Play something," he ordered. Maria's stomach tightened. She looked at him, unsure if she heard correctly. "Sir, I—" "Sit," he repeated, not harsh, but firm like a man who expected obedience. Her hands shook as she sat on the piano bench. She had dreamed of playing again, but not like this, not under command, with fear sitting beside her. She placed her fingers on the keys slowly, carefully, like touching a memory she feared might break. The room was silent. The house was silent. Her breath was loud inside her chest. She pressed one key, just one. A single note echoed through the room. It vibrated in the walls, in the floor, inside her bones. It felt familiar, like a forgotten voice whispering, "Welcome back." Whitford's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in focus. Something about that note held emotion, depth, not just sound. Maria swallowed, closed her eyes, and pressed another note, and another. Her fingers trembled, but the music came shy at first, like a bird stepping out of a cage after years. The melody was soft, fragile, full of longing, a sound no amount of wealth could buy. Whitford stood still, watching. He expected a housekeeper, but he had found something else, something powerful. Something he never imagined lived inside the woman who mopped his floors. Maria's fingers hovered over the piano keys like birds unsure if they should fly. The silence in the room felt heavy, not empty, but tense, like the air itself was waiting to see what she would do. She could feel Mr. Whitford's gaze on her, sharp and unreadable. It was not the look of a man listening to music. It was the look of someone judging, measuring, expecting. She closed her eyes. In that moment, everything faded: the mansion, the silence, the pressure. All she could feel was the smooth, cool touch of the keys beneath her fingertips. Her hands remembered what her mind had tried to forget. Every lesson she once learned, every evening she practiced until her mother called her for dinner, every stage she dreamed of standing on, it all returned like a flood through a small opening. She pressed down again. This time not one note but two, then three, and slowly a melody began to form. It wasn't perfect. Her fingers trembled from nerves and lack of practice. But the sound was real, emotional, raw, honest. Soft tones filled the air like a story being told without words. Notes rose and fell like waves in the ocean she once loved watching as a child. The broken dreams she buried, the sacrifices she made, the hunger, the loss, the quiet strength, it all lived inside the music. Mr. Whitford stood like a statue, arms crossed, expression frozen. He had expected a mistake, a clumsy attempt from a woman who cleaned floors. But what he heard was something far greater, something he wasn't prepared for. The room changed. It didn't feel like a mansion anymore. It felt like a memory, someone else's memory, yet strangely his own. He saw Maria not as a housekeeper now, but as someone who once belonged to music the way a bird belongs to the sky. Maria played for only a minute, a single minute that felt like a lifetime. When her hands finally stopped, silence returned, but it was not the cold silence the mansion once knew. It was a silence filled with breath, warmth, surprise. Maria kept her eyes lowered, afraid to see his reaction. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I have not played in years." She stood to leave, thinking the moment was over, thinking her music had been nothing more than an obligation she wished she could escape. But before she could step away, Whitford spoke, "Play again." The words were quiet but powerful, not a command, not anger, something else. She looked up, confused. "Again," he repeated, "continue." There was no harshness in him now, no cold authority. His voice was softer, like someone asking for something they didn't know they needed. Maria sat again, this time with less fear, not because she felt free but because she felt seen. She placed her hands on the keys once more and began to play, slower this time, more controlled, like she was rediscovering herself note by note. Whitford moved closer. He didn't speak. He didn't blink much, he simply listened. He remembered something long ago when he was young. His mother played the piano while he did homework by the window. He remembered the warmth in the house, the laughter, the comfort. He remembered music not as sound but as love. Maria's playing made him remember what he lost, and that frightened him, because he realized something painful. He had locked away not just his piano but his heart. When she finished again, Mr. Whitford exhaled deeply, as if he had been holding his breath the entire time. His voice was calmer when he spoke. "How long have you been hiding this talent?" Maria lowered her gaze. "Since my father died," she said quietly. "I stopped playing, life became different." He studied her face, tired but strong, humble but luminous. "You shouldn't have stopped," he said. Maria smiled faintly. It wasn't joy, it was a wound that learned to live with itself. "Sometimes we don't choose to stop," she whispered. "Life chooses for us." Those words cut through him like a truth he didn't expect. Mr. Whitford walked closer to the piano, his fingers brushing lightly across the keys. Maria watched him, unsure of what he felt. Then in a low voice he said, "You will play for me tomorrow." It sounded like an order, but it was. It was an invitation, a door opening. Maria nodded gently. "Yes, sir." As she left the room, Whitford remained by the piano, staring at the keys like he was looking at a sleeping memory. He knew something had changed today. He just didn't know how big that change would become. Not yet. Not until her music returned again and again, until it softened parts of him he believed were gone forever. But for now, this was the beginning. The first crack in the walls around his heart. All because a housekeeper touched a piano. The next morning, the mansion felt different, almost as if the walls themselves remembered the sound from last night. The air was lighter, the silence softer, like music still floated through it even though no one was playing. Maria woke early, though she hardly slept. Her mind replayed yesterday's moment again and again, the touch of the piano, the notes she thought she had lost forever, and the way Mr. Whitford listened, not as a wealthy owner, but as a man hearing truth for the first time in a long while. She dressed in her uniform and tied her apron neatly, but today her hands were not only meant for chores, they were meant for keys. When she entered the music hall, she found Whitford already there. He was standing near the window, hands behind his back, staring out into the garden as if thinking about something too heavy for words. He turned when he heard her steps. "You are here early," he said. His voice was calm, but there was something under it, something like anticipation. Maria lowered her eyes respectfully. "You asked me to play, sir." And there it was, the sound of a request, not a command. Whitford nodded once quietly. "Yes, play." She sat on the bench again, slightly more confident than yesterday, yet her heart still beat faster than normal. Her fingers rested on the cold keys, but this time the cold didn't scare her. It felt familiar, like meeting an old friend after years apart. She began. The sound rose gently, like light spreading across a dark room. Whitford didn't move from where he stood, but his breathing slowed as the notes wrapped around him. Maria played a piece she once practiced as a young girl, a piece she never played again after hardship stole her future. She remembered her mother's smile, her father's proud eyes, her little sister humming along. The piano brought all those memories back, painting them in sound. Whitford watched her. In her hunched shoulders he saw struggle. In her steady hands he saw discipline. In her eyes he saw everything she never spoke. And in her music he heard her life. When she finished, she did not look up immediately. She sat still, hands in her lap, unsure if she had played enough or too much. She waited for his reaction like someone waiting for judgment. But he didn't speak right away. Instead, he walked to the piano slowly, every step controlled yet filled with something he didn't want to show too openly. He stood beside her, looking at her hands, small, hardworking hands capable of more than cleaning floors. "You were trained," he said. Maria nodded softly. "Yes, sir, before life changed." He looked at her closely, eyes gentler now. "Do you regret leaving music?" She swallowed. The question felt like a knife and a gift together. Every day, she whispered, but dreams do not feed the stomach, survival does. Whitford felt those words like a stone dropping into a deep well. He, a man with endless wealth, could buy anything, but here was a woman who once had talent richer than gold, yet life forced her to trade it for survival. He turned toward the piano keys. "My daughter used to play," he said, voice suddenly soft, broken at the edges. She loved music more than anything. Maria looked up slowly. It was the first time he spoke of personal things. The first time he was not only a millionaire, but a man carrying memories like heavy stones in his chest. "She passed away young," he continued, not loudly, not with tears, but with the quiet ache of someone who had lived through pain too deep for words. Maria's eyes softened. She understood. Loss was something she knew well. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded, accepting the sympathy. "After she was gone, I locked this piano. I could not bear the sound of it anymore. Music reminded me of her and of what I lost." Maria listened not as a servant, but as a human connected by shared pain. And then he said something she never expected. "Your music brought this room to life again." Her breath caught. No one had praised her in years. No one had said she mattered, not as a cleaner, not as a forgotten talent, not as a person. But now, a man who never wasted words spoke them for her. She didn't know what to say, so she lowered her head not in fear but in gratitude. Silence followed, but it was a warm silence. Whitford stepped back and took a deep breath. His shoulders were not as stiff now. He looked at Maria not as a housekeeper, but as someone who had opened a door inside him he thought was sealed forever. "Tomorrow," he said gently, "play again." Maria nodded, this time with quiet confidence. "I will, sir." As she left the room, the piano gleamed under morning light, no longer just an instrument, but a bridge between two wounded hearts healing note by note. Whitford remained standing in the hall long after she was gone. He leaned on the piano, closed his eyes, and for the first time in many years, he smiled. In the days that followed, Maria's music became a part of the mansion like sunlight through a window, gentle at first, then impossible to ignore. Every morning she played for a short while before beginning her duties. At first she hesitated, feeling like she was taking too much space in a home that was not hers. But Mr. Whitford always arrived quietly, standing at the doorway, listening without interrupting. His presence no longer felt heavy. It felt like someone breathing again after years underwater. The staff noticed the change too. They whispered among themselves that the piano room, once silent like a museum, now carried melodies like butterflies fluttering through forgotten corners. They looked at Maria with new respect, surprised that the same woman who scrubbed floors could make a piano sing. But music does not heal wounds without stirring them first. One afternoon, while Maria was polishing the dining table, Whitford entered the room and stopped near her. There was a pause, the kind that feels like a question. "Do you ever think of performing again?" he asked suddenly. Maria froze. Her hand tightened around the cloth in her hand. Performing, the word was heavy, like a dream too delicate to touch. "I don't think I belong to that world anymore," she replied softly. Whitford studied her expression. She wasn't just doubtful, she was afraid. Afraid of hoping, afraid of losing again, afraid of remembering who she once wanted to be. "Talent like yours shouldn't remain hidden," he said. Maria looked down. "Talent doesn't pay bills, sir. Poverty teaches you to bury dreams." He heard not just her words, but the pain behind them, pain shaped like hunger, loss, responsibility. He had money but no family. She had talent but no opportunity. They were two halves of something broken, meeting each other in the middle without realizing why fate had crossed their paths. "Then perhaps it's time someone helped you dig that dream back up," he said. Maria blinked. She wasn't sure she understood. "Help me." Whitford nodded slowly, as if the decision formed within him as he spoke. "I would like to support your music, lessons, training, whatever you need." Maria's chest tightened. She stepped back, slightly overwhelmed. "Sir, I cannot accept something so big." "Why not?" he asked softly. Her eyes shimmered. She didn't say the real reason, that she didn't feel worthy. That life had taught her to take only what was necessary, never what was beautiful. Instead, she whispered, "I don't know if I'm good enough anymore." Whitford's voice became firmer, not harsh, but steady, like someone offering a hand to someone drowning. "You are, I've heard you." Maria felt tears burn her eyes, but she blinked them away. For years, no one listened to her. No one cared about her story, her talent, her sacrifice. Now she stood in front of a man who once commanded her but was now encouraging her to rise. Before she could respond, a maid entered the room with a stack of freshly delivered letters. On top was a bright invitation card, an elegant gold-printed announcement for a charity evening dedicated to music and art. Whitford picked it up, glanced over it, then paused. He looked at Maria. His eyes softened. "This could be your first performance," he said. Maria's breath caught, her heart raced. "My performance." She imagined it, lights, people watching, the sound of applause or silence or judgment. Excitement mixed with fear like storm clouds behind sunlight. I don't know if I can, she stuttered. You can, Whitford replied gently. I believe you can. No one had believed in her like that in years. The words wrapped around her like warmth in winter, but Maria shook her head slightly, voice trembling. What if I fail? Whitford answered slowly with the weight of a man who had lost and learned. Failure is not falling. Failure is refusing to try. A long silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with possibilities, like a note hanging in the air waiting to resolve into music. Maria finally nodded, not with certainty but with courage. I will try. Whitford's expression softened into something rare, pride, a feeling he thought he could never feel again. In the evenings that followed, Maria practiced not quietly but boldly. Her fingers grew stronger, her confidence steadier, her melodies richer. The piano no longer sounded like memory, it sounded like rebirth. Whitford attended every practice. Sometimes he sat, sometimes he stood, sometimes he closed his eyes and let the music wash over him like a tide he no longer wanted to resist. The mansion glowed differently now, not with electricity but with soul. Slowly, without either noticing exactly when it happened, their lives intertwined. She brought music. He brought opportunity. She opened doors to sound. He opened doors to future. But neither knew that the performance ahead would change everything. Not only for Maria, but for him, because the night she stepped on that stage, she wouldn't perform alone. She would carry both their stories in her hands. At last, the night of the charity event arrived, a date that once felt distant. Now standing like a doorway, Maria was finally ready to walk through. She woke before sunrise, heart beating faster than usual, hands trembling even though she tried to steady them. The air in the mansion seemed charged with something electric, not fear, not tension, but anticipation. She dressed carefully, tying her hair back neatly, repeating in her head the words Whitford had given her like medicine for doubt. You can. I believe you can. He waited for her near the staircase, dressed sharply in a black suit, posture proud but eyes gentle. When he saw her, he didn't comment on her nervousness, though it was visible in every shaky breath she took. Instead, he spoke calmly. Tonight is not about perfection, it is about truth, and you have plenty. She nodded, clutching her fingers together to stop their trembling. They stepped into the limousine that waited outside. The ride felt endless yet too fast at the same time. Maria watched the city lights slide past like stars falling behind glass. She had walked these streets as a nobody. Now she was going to stand before people who had power, money, judgment, and she was expected to play. Her throat tightened. At the venue, everything felt overwhelming. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers. Voices echoing like water in a large hall. Elegant guests moved through the entrance in gowns and tuxedos. Maria felt small, painfully small, a maid in a place made for royalty. Then she felt something, a hand gently at her back. Whitford, he didn't look at her, but his presence said everything. He was there. She was not alone, that was enough. They took their seats in the front row, right near the stage where a glossy black piano stood waiting. The sight of it sent shivers through Maria. It looked like the one she played back in the mansion, only bigger, louder, demanding courage she wasn't sure she had. Names of performers were announced. Violinists, singers, trained pianists who played effortlessly, showered with applause. Maria's heart pounded harder with each minute. Her turn was approaching like a wave she couldn't outrun. At last, the host spoke. And now a special performance, a housekeeper with a story told through music. Please welcome Maria. The room became very still. Please welcome Maria. The room became very still. Maria stood, her legs felt weak. The hall seemed too bright, too wide, too filled with eyes. People whispered, some curious, some doubtful, some amused. A housekeeper performing, to them it sounded like a joke. Whitford saw her hesitation. He leaned closer, voice low and steady. Look at the piano, only the piano, the rest of the world will disappear. Maria inhaled deeply, one slow, shaking breath. Then she walked to the piano. Each step sounded loud in her ears, softer in reality. She sat, placed her fingers on the keys, and for a second the entire hall was silent. Even her heartbeat paused, waiting. Then she pressed the first note. Soft, gentle. Like a memory opening its eyes. More notes followed, slow at first, unsure, like someone learning to speak after years of silence. But then something shifted. Her fingers found confidence, like they remembered who they used to be. The melody grew warmer, deeper, no longer hesitant, but alive. The hall went quiet. People who whispered now stared. Their faces changed, confusion turned into surprise, surprise into admiration. They did not expect this. Not from a maid with calloused hands and second-hand shoes. Maria's playing became a story of a girl with dreams buried under hardship. A story of hunger, loss, and sacrifice. A story of music that refused to die even when she did. The notes rose higher like wings spreading wide. Whitford watched with eyes that burned not from sadness but from something stronger, pride and pain and healing. He saw her bravery. He saw his daughter in her strength. He saw a future that no longer felt cold. Maria poured everything into the final chords, every struggle, every hope, every piece of herself. And when the last note faded into the air like a long breath released, silence returned, but it wasn't empty silence, it was stunned silence. Then applause, loud, rising, filling the room. People stood from their seats, clapping with awe, some with tears shining like glass under the lights. No one saw her as a housekeeper now, they saw a musician, a survivor, a woman who turned pain into beauty. Maria looked up, breath shaky, vision blurred with tears she tried not to shed. Her eyes searched the crowd. They found Whitford. He was already standing, not clapping politely, but with emotion raw in his gaze. His face, usually firm like stone, now softened with something rare, something beautiful. He whispered, though she couldn't hear, she read it in his eyes, "You did it." She bowed her head, overwhelmed, heart full like it had never been. For the first time in many years, she felt alive. Not working, not surviving, living. And as the applause continued like thunder around her, she knew this was only the beginning. The applause faded slowly, like waves pulling back into the sea, but its echo stayed inside Maria long after. Her fingers still tingled from the keys, her heartbeat hadn't slowed, and the room around her felt brighter than she remembered the world could be. She stood there trembling, not from fear anymore, but from triumph. For years she thought her talent was lost under dust and struggle, but it was alive. When she stepped down from the stage, she expected silence, maybe polite nods, maybe nothing at all. Instead, people approached her smiling, praising, asking questions. Hands reached to shake hers, voices filled with admiration. That was breathtaking. "Where have you been hiding all this time? You play with soul, real soul." She wasn't used to being seen. She had spent years blending into background, scrubbing floors quietly, mopping corners where voices didn't reach. But now every eye found her. Every word honored her. She felt like a person, not a shadow. Through all the faces, one mattered most, Whitford. He stood still, watching her with eyes that told more than words could express, eyes full of pride, disbelief, and something softer than either, care. When she walked toward him, she expected formality, his usual composed control. Instead, he stepped closer and spoke quietly, but with a fragile honesty she had never heard in his voice. "You made the world listen, Maria." The words struck deep like warmth, melting ice inside her. She lowered her gaze, humble as always. "I only played, sir." "No," he replied gently, "you revealed." They left the venue later than planned. Surrounded by compliments, invitations, business cards slipped into Maria's hand by people who wanted her to perform again. She felt overwhelmed and light at the same time, like she was walking through a dream with her eyes open. In the limousine back home, the city lights flickered on the windows like tiny celebrations. Maria held one of the invitation cards tightly, afraid that if she let go, the opportunity might disappear. Whitford noticed. He spoke softly but firmly. "You belong on stages, Maria, not hidden in dust." She shook her head, voice small. "It's too big for me, sir. My life, my position has changed," he finished for her, not a question, a truth. Maria blinked, taken aback. She looked at him, really looked, and saw a man who wasn't just offering help, he was offering belief. A chance she thought life would never give her again. When they reached the mansion, the night felt different from all nights before. The piano room glowed in soft lamplight, as if waiting to welcome her home. Maria walked in slowly, fingertips brushing the polished surface like greeting an old friend after a long journey. Whitford followed and stood near her, silent for a moment. Then, in a voice gentle enough to move the air around them, he asked, "Maria, if music was still your life, who would you be?" She closed her eyes, her mind filled with images. A young girl on a small stage, her sister clapping proudly, her father smiling wide, her mother humming along. A future she once saw clearly now returning like sunlight through clouds. "I would be a pianist," she whispered, not dreaming, declaring. Whitford nodded. A decision formed in his eyes, steady, irreversible. He stepped closer, not as a master speaking to an employee, but as a man speaking to someone he cared about deeply. "Then let me help you become one." Maria's breath caught. She looked up sharply, shocked, grateful, afraid. "Why me?" she asked. "Out of everyone." He hesitated, not because he didn't know the answer, but because saying it made him vulnerable. "You remind me that life can still surprise me," he said. "You bring something to this house that I thought died long ago." "Music, warmth, life," he continued softly. "You gave me something no money ever could. Let me give you something back." Maria felt tears push forward, not of sadness but of relief. For the first time in years, someone saw her not as a worker, not as a survivor, but as a person worthy of dreams, a pianist, a future. She nodded slowly, voice trembling. "I will accept." Not because she felt ready, but because she finally believed she could be. Whitford smiled, a real smile, rare and gentle. "Then tomorrow," he said, "your training begins." In that moment, they were no longer millionaire and housekeeper, no longer stern employer and silent worker. They were two broken pieces learning to rebuild, not alone, but together. And neither of them knew that the next steps, the next notes, would change both of their lives far beyond music. Because talent revealed is only the beginning. When a dream wakes up, it does not sleep again. The next weeks turned into something Maria never imagined she would live to see. Instead of scrubbing floors at sunrise, she began her mornings at the piano, warming her fingers the way a singer warms her voice. Whitford hired a private music instructor, a kind elderly woman named Mrs. Lorraine who understood both discipline and heart. She didn't just teach Maria to play, she taught her to feel again. At first, Maria struggled. Her fingers were stiff from years of work, her timing slipped, memories of lost dreams sometimes choked her notes. But every time she faltered, she remembered Whitford's words, "You belong here," and she tried again. Whitford watched her grow, quietly, carefully, like a man watching light seep back into a room he once thought would stay dark forever. Sometimes he joined her piano sessions just to listen. Sometimes he brought her tea. Sometimes he said nothing at all, but his presence became her strength. One evening, weeks later, after a long practice session, Maria finished a difficult piece flawlessly. The final chord lingered in the air like gold dust floating. She lifted her hands slowly, tears forming not from sadness but from triumph. Whitford clapped, not gently, not politely, but proudly. "You are no longer a hidden talent," he said. "You are a pianist." Maria covered her mouth with her hand, overcome by emotion. She had been waiting her whole life to hear those words. He stepped closer, voice steady but warm. "And now the world should hear you again." Maria stared at him, eyes wide. "Again." Whitford handed her an envelope, thick, embossed, elegant. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was an invitation to perform at a prestigious music gala, not as a housekeeper, not as a charity performer, but as an official pianist. Her lips parted. "This is for me." "For you," he confirmed. "You've earned it." Maria pressed the envelope to her chest and stood there silently, tears slipping down her cheeks. Tears of disbelief, joy, and gratitude heavier than any she had shed before. The night of the gala arrived like destiny knocking softly but firmly. Maria wore a simple but graceful gown Whitford had chosen carefully, nothing flashy, nothing loud, just elegance and dignity. When she walked into the hall, she did not shrink like before. Her steps were still gentle, but they were certain. People recognized her, whispers spread, "That's the housekeeper who played. She has real talent. She belongs here." And Maria, for the first time, believed the same. When she sat at the piano, the hall fell quiet, not skeptical silence, but respectful silence, the kind saved for someone worth listening to. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and began. The music that filled the hall was no longer timid or trembling. It was powerful, like a heart reborn. Every note carried her history, her wounds, her healing. The melody climbed like someone rising from darkness toward morning light. It was not survival anymore, it was celebration. Whitford sat in the front row, watching with eyes that shimmered. When she reached the high crescendo, he exhaled, not heavy like a man in pain, but light like a man set free. Her music didn't just heal her, it healed him too. When the performance ended, the applause did not simply rise, it roared. People stood, clapped, cheered, called her name. Maria bowed, smiling through tears, hand against her heart. She felt whole, she felt seen, she felt alive. Later, as guests surrounded her, Whitford stepped forward through the crowd. They stood facing each other, two lives once broken, now bound together through music. "You changed the silence in this house," he said softly. "And you changed the silence in my life," she replied. For a moment they simply stood there, not master and servant, not rich and poor, not past and present, but two souls who helped each other rise. Maria returned to the mansion not as a housekeeper anymore. The cleaning uniform was folded away, respectfully, like a chapter finished. She walked into the piano room, her room now, and touched the keys gently, warmly. The mansion was no longer cold. The piano was no longer quiet. And she was no longer invisible. Her music lived. Her dream lived. She lived. All because a millionaire compelled a housekeeper to play. Never knowing her first note would change both of their lives forever. Change both of their lives forever.